Hello and welcome to the Rubber Duck Dev Show. I'm Chris.
I'm Kristen.
And I'm Drew.
And tonight we're going to talk about getting stuff done. Drew's going to take us through kind of how do you motivate yourself? How do how do you keep things going when it's, fingers on keyboard and you're just burnt out from it and don't want to do that next thing on your list. So we're going to talk about some things there. But before we get going, we can review. Kristen, how was your week?
Plates be a spinning. I keep spinning, juggling all sorts of different stuff, multiple different clients, work on my own product, different database consulting, Rails consulting. I don't have, I guess a win is that someone emailed me a couple of days ago, says, I can't figure out why Postgres is doing this. And like basically query was taking 40 seconds long, but another query was taking like 250 milliseconds. So vastly different when you chose one value as opposed to two values. Long story short, it was doing an n in some value. So when they were only selecting one value, it was Postgres was converting it to an equals. Whereas when you had multiple values, if you look at the explain plan, it was doing an any. So it was considering it an array. And for whatever reason, considering it array, it used a more optimized plan. Like pretty optimized compared to 40 seconds to 250 milliseconds. But really, they were trying to do some typecasting of different types. I'm not quite sure why. I haven't understood that yet. So really the plan was about twice as complicated as it needed to be. So, and that's probably why the big performance difference, just going from an equals to an any, shouldn't cause that big a problem. But I actually rewrote the query and said, I would probably rewrite it this way to avoid some of this typecasting, because then you can actually start using indexes. And then that version, compared to 250 milliseconds, was now, what was it? Less than a millisecond.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So I'm like,
Jeez.
I think that's a pretty good win. But, they were using a view and some other things, and I was just use a slightly different technique. And I said, you could still use the view, just be careful of type conversions, like casting to a different type, because then suddenly you can no longer use indexes that are there. So that's just something in general to keep in mind. Apart from that, again, just doing a bunch of consulting, helping people out, moving forward, getting stuff done. What about you?
So I got having some good success with this R-Swag gym. I did a POC on it yesterday. Did the dog and pony with it with the muckety mucks, and it had really good.
What is R-Swag? I can't remember.
It's a gem that puts automated Swagger documentation generation into RSpec.
Oh, right. Okay, gotcha.
So it seems to be working really well. I'm happy that we can get. Hey, Colin, what's going on, man?
Howdy.
We can get RSwag docs being generated automatically with our test runs and automatically deployed. That's going to make a big difference, and that gem seems to be working really well. So if you want to automate your API documentation into your tests and have your documentation actually tested, RSwag seems like a pretty good gem to use for that purpose.
Now, does it generate the documentation based upon a separate command you run, or is it the actual running of the tests, or does it read the tests? Does it read the code? How does it actually generate the
There's a DSL
documentation
for it, a little bit of an extended DSL that you put into RSpec, but it has actual tests in it, so it's like request specs, so it'll make the actual request calls and get the results back and make those the examples. I have a robot voice coming through on the stream.
Oh no.
Don't
Sound fine to me.
They sound fine to me.
Okay. Well, we'll keep going and see if it clears up. Maybe it's just a network thing. Well, that's my deep, sexy voice, Colin. What do you want me to do? I can't help how I am, dude. But everyone else sounds fine. It's just me, huh?
Oh, no.
Just you. You're the lucky one.
Yeah. Is it listenable, or do I need to go do some work? Anyway, I don't know what I was saying. Oh, R-Swag. So, yeah, it has a rate task that you run that actually will run the tests that are marked as R-Swag and generate the docs from that. But the tests and the docs all run together, and it uses the request response items from the actual tests to generate examples and headers and all that stuff. So,
Okay.
So you can make sure your examples actually match what people will get when they call that endpoint.
So it's basically ties into the tests.
Yep.
And you specify, hey, I want this to be R-swagged, I guess, or whatever. And when you run run your tests, it then generates the docs.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. So it's not much more than setting up a request spec. Really, there's a little bit extra stuff where you can put some defined parameters, defined descriptions, that kind of thing. But it puts out just basic standard OpenAPI 3.0 or swag or swagger docs, either as a JSON or a YAML, and you can just throw it wherever you gotta throw it. So, how about you, Drew?
I have been beaten this Rails 5.2 upgrade into submission for a while, and I finally got everything done locally, and I went to deploy it to one of our testing servers, and Webpacker exploded. So I have been trying to figure that out. It works fine locally. I can SSH into the server.
Works on my
and
machine.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah, it's so that's been fun. So I had to give a presentation on some stuff at our engineering meeting, so I was putting together slides for that, and yeah, it's been a good week. I'm looking forward to it being Friday though, and long weekend.
Yeah.
So when you have something like that, do you, like in your organization, does that mean you just gotta buckle up and figure out what it is, or do you have other people that can join in to help diagnose, figure out what's wrong?
Yeah, there's a few other people that could help, because there's other people that are pretty familiar with how our Webpacker is configured, with how our deployments go, and might be able to pick apart some things. So early next week, I'll kind of rope in the other. I've pretty much exhausted all of my avenues of debugging, so I'll start roping people in next week. And hopefully someone smarter than me will go, oh, it's this thing, and it'll be an easy fix. But for now, it's a blocker. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. So I think I figured out what's going on with my voice. I think. So does that sound better, chat? I upgraded OBS a couple days ago, and things just went all kinds of squirrely. So I think it turned some filters back onto my mic that shouldn't have been on.
Yeah, I have the YouTube stream up, and you sound better.
Oh, good. Yeah,
at least for the YouTube stream.
Yeah,
there you go.
It had a I've been playing around with a pitch shifter like months and months and months ago, right? And I had turned that filter off in OBS, but when I updated OBS, apparently it turned that back on. So I got my sexy voice back, but really that's not the best for streaming. Anyway, so I guess that's a good segue into getting stuff done. I mean, part of getting stuff done is dealing with crap that goes backwards sometimes.
Yeah.
Hey, Sudu. So what kind of things do you do? Like when you talk to people, if juniors or people who are learning or in school and stuff, and they say, Hey, I want to get better at getting stuff done, right? Like the first thing everybody says is make a to-do list. So but I think there's more to getting stuff done than that, because I can have a to-do list. That doesn't mean I'm motivated to do anything with that to-do list, right?
Right.
So in the context specifically of like development and programming, how do you get yourself motivated to do the non-hobby programming? Because hobby programming, that's fun. I want to do that, right? I want to hack on my Dragon Ruby game stuff.
Yeah.
But the work stuff, how do you go?
I mean, I'm going to say something controversial here. It depends. Yeah, shocking, right? Because I mean, motivation, at least, and this caveat to everything I'm about to say, this is what has worked for me, and I am just, there's a lot going on up here. I'm ADHD to the nth degree and have had experiences that are somewhat fairly unique. And so like, if I say something and you're like, I've tried that doesn't work for me, like, oh, sorry, but like, this is what works for me. Sometimes I just have to trick myself, right? Like, and I actually have to change up. This is the thing that has made the biggest impact for me, is like changing my approach to tricking myself into being motivated. So sometimes it's like gamifying stuff, like giving myself little achievements, or like finding those to-do lists, or those trackers that will give you like little power-ups, or there's ones that make it like a role-playing game, or just something like that. Like I have to feel like it's a game. Other times it's like making a story out of it, like with the hero journal type of stuff, or just setting up something in Slack where I have announced to the team, I am going to do X by this day. And I'm like, well, I don't want to let the team down. I don't want people waiting on my stuff. So here we go. This is what I'm doing. And it comes and goes as far as what I need to be motivated, what I need to get stuff done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's one important aspect that I universally see as helping, well, not universally, 90% of the time for people that I talk to, is accountability to somebody else. Mm-hmm. If it bothers me if I don't get something done and that causes a coworker to not be able to do what they need to do because they're waiting on me and hanging on me to get my shit done. Right.
Yep. Yeah. So my friend Meg has, she does a lot of helping with folks who are just getting in or juniors. And she calls it, I'm probably going to screw it up, but she said getting an accountability buddy, where it's like just someone to hold you accountable to things and like help you set up like your goals and your to-do list. And then you're just having check-ins and you're saying, oh, what, did you get this thing done? Oh, you didn't. What's blocking you? Like, let's talk through it and things like that. That it's amazing how simple that sounds, but how much it helps. Just having, that's why Agile works with those daily stand-ups, right? Like when you're doing that constant check-in, you're kind of always iterating. You have to stand up and say, I didn't get the thing done. And either it's because there's a blocker and cool, let's work through it, let's get you unblocked, or you just like, you didn't meet your end of the bargain, and that never feels good. So you turn that into motivation.
Yeah. And Sudu says, for me, motivation helps when I focus someone that I'm part of a bigger picture, a cog in a big machine. And I think that's the accountability part, is that, I'm accountable to my team, my team workers to do what I need to do so they can do what they need to do. And if I fall down, we all fall down. Right.
Yeah. And as you were talking about that, that's totally the case. And like, I haven't had a boss in, oh my gosh, over 10 years, but my bosses are my customers, my clients, basically. So like when I was first starting my app, the number one motivating thing is when I finally had a customer to actually serve. Like the motivation was much lower when I had, quote unquote, all the time in the world to build the app as I want. So if you're thinking about doing that, most important thing to do is get a customer ASAP, because that gives you that accountability buddy, or, however you want to
Yeah.
phrase it, to, say, okay, we're working to help this person.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, Seb, welcome.
He said.
So I think you bring up a good point too. There's a difference between what I need to do to motivate myself when I'm in a team production environment, and what I need to do when I have to motivate myself when I'm working on a solo project. Like, hey, I'm working on my OSS thing that 1,000 people use and I'm the only one maintaining it. That's a much different motivation set than, hey, I'm getting this fat paycheck because I'm working on this team of programmers, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and there's something to be said too for like you mentioned earlier, it's pretty easy to motivate yourself when you're just hacking on like your game thing, right? When there's no one like looming, you're just like, I'm just going to get this thing done, versus I've got this project that a ton of people use and they're relying on, like, sometimes I feel like, or at least for me, that it's easier to do those hobby hacky projects because, like, you set yourself a goal of doing this thing, right? This one, I'm just going to get sprites to show up on my game screen and then I'll feel really accomplished.
boy,
Conversely, when you have that big right, and then but conversely you have this big project and maybe you have like 100 issues, or there's so many people using it and they're waiting for this thing, and suddenly, like, there's a shit ton of pressure there. And you might start getting a little bit of an executive dysfunction of, like, I have too much to do. Like,
Right.
that is the number one pitfall, I think, of to-do lists, is if you just start making a giant to-do list of all of these things, you look at it, you're just, I have so much shit to do. I don't even know where to start. I don't know what to do. I'm gonna go play video games. Right? Like so one of my a strategy that I thought I'd come up with, I was feeling sort of proud of myself. I'm constantly trying to think of ways to hack my brain, right? Once I figure out another new thing about way my brain works, is like, okay, how can I use that to my advantage? How can I turn this deficit of my brain into an advantage? And I thought, by only giving myself 3 things in a day that I have to do, right? To feel accomplished, to say, I have done a good job today, I need to do these 3 things. And that's what I set myself in the morning. And I was talking to Joe Mazzolotti, and he's like, yeah, I only give myself 3 things. And once I get those 3 things done, I'm done for the day. And he's like, I'm getting more done because of it. I was like, all right, it wasn't just me. I'm on to something. Like, this works.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but it works. So sometimes the trick is just give yourself less stuff to do.
That's
right?
for
Like,
sure.
it sounds crazy, but if you can just like, if you have 100 things on your to-do list and that feels overwhelming and you're not getting anything done because there's too many things, but if you can every day get 3 things done, you're going to burn through that 100 items pretty quick.
Yeah. And I do, to that point, and then, Seb has a question too that we'll address, but to that point, I do think that it's a good idea for most people. And this is, I'll caveat this with, different people think differently and their brains work differently. So, your mileage may vary, but almost universally what I see is, when people can write things down on a to-do list, no matter how big the list is, it's good for getting that out of your brain so your brain doesn't have to hold on to it anymore. Then you can look, and don't put that to-do list hanging in front of you, right? Just pick your 3 things from that to-do list for the day, throw them on your hangy in front of your do list. Boy, that was easy. To-do list, and then get your master to-do list out of the way, unless you need to add something to it. But what I found is writing those things down, just scribbling them down, even if I never go back to it, right, gets it out of my head so that I can concentrate on, instead of thinking about all the things, I think about the next thing.
Yeah. And another trick, this is my favorite trick, and it's a little hacky. Don't tell anyone I do this, but sometimes I will put something on my to-do list that I've already done. just to get the dopamine kick of
Mhm.
checking off a thing on my to-do list. Like, it sounds silly, but it motivates me. You check that box and you're like, I'm a third of the way there. I'm rocking. I'm crushing it today.
Right.
It sounds silly, but it works. And that's all that matters, right? Is once you find something that works, use it until it's no longer working, and then find another thing that works.
Right. And that I think so. Seb asked this question, and I think this will help address that. Do you struggle with task projects after rushing for 95%? This is an issue for me, actually closing stuff. This always is hard to get motivation, that final push. Yes, pulling stuff across the finish line, for some reason, for most people that I talk to, is like, yeah, I'm almost there, but I'm over it. So let's, and I have that problem because I get bored with things. I love to start new stuff and get into new things, but then I get bored really easily, and I'm like, okay, I've explored as much of that as I want to explore. Let me play with something else. But you have to pull things across the finish line or you're never going to accomplish anything. And I think what you were talking about, that dopamine hit, one of the tricks that I use is that instead of saying, hey, my task is to upgrade to Rails 7, right? I'll say, I'll take that task and make that like an epic and break it down into things that I can do in half an hour.
Yeah.
Upgrade this gem. Because then I get the constant dopamine hits throughout the day of check, check, check. And that leads me across the finish line much easier.
And that's exactly what Pseudo said in the chat just now.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. And that's like when you first start off on something and you're like blank canvas, everything feels like this huge accomplishment, right? Like getting a sprite to render in your game is like this huge thing. But then as you get closer to the end, you're doing those little things, you're tweaking things now. You sort of lose that velocity. So going back to tricking, you just got to trick yourself into feeling really like make a big deal out of little things. If it's 3 things on your to-do list and you make a big deal out of those 3 things, then if your one thing is like fix error handling for this random edge case, like then you get to check the box and you're going to get things done then.
Right. And I think something a pattern I'm starting to notice as I talk to more and more developers is that ADHD seems to be a much higher percentage of developers, I think, than general populace, it seems. Maybe it's just the personality type that draws to programming or whatever, but, and I don't have ADHD, so I'm not going to claim to fully understand it, but my sense is from talking to people is that breaking things down into really small chunks like that actually helps with the ADHD because you don't have to focus as long on one thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be fair, I do have ADHD and I don't completely understand it. I'm learning something new about, I just recorded a podcast episode that'll be coming out in March with Andrew Mason, who is another arguably prolific ADHD developer in the community. And we were talking about all different ways that we hack our ADHD or have to tweak things. And he linked me some stuff that I didn't know. I learned a whole bunch of new stuff about my own ADHD, the stuff that I deal with every day. I just had no idea. So it's sort of cool. I get to learn something new every day, but at the same time, sometimes it's depressing. Like, oh, it turns out that I have another hormone in my brain or chemical in my brain that isn't at the right levels. Great. Another thing to tackle.
Yeah. But I think, I think it's a good idea if you want to get more productive at things and actually get stuff done, right? You need to understand how you think because you 100%. Don't think like anybody else thinks. And the more you do understanding about how your brain works and how you think as an individual, the better you can craft systems to help you be more productive. Because what works for you isn't going to work as well for me and vice versa, right? Because our brains are different. And not because you have ADHD, but because you're a different person than me.
Right. But I mean, and one of the biggest things I know, Andrew talks about it a lot, and I wholeheartedly agree, is like if you're on a team, the best thing you can do and you have ADHD especially, but if you just know anything weird about the way you, not weird as in bad, but just like different than the way you think, is to be open and honest with your team about the way you work. Like, it's huge for me in ADHD to just say like, hey, I have days where like I can get 3 days worth of work done in 8 hours, and then I'll have 2 days where I can't get anything done. And the moment my team understands that, they know it's gonna get done. It's just not gonna be every day they're gonna see 3 PRs from me.
Right.
Like they don't expect the velocity to be consistent every day. And I have benefited from that because I no longer pressure myself into having the velocity,
Mm-hmm.
the same velocity every day, because every day is different for me.
Yeah.
Like there are days I wake up, if I didn't sleep good the night before, and I think this isn't necessarily an ADHD thing, but like if I didn't sleep good, I am not nearly as productive as if I got a good night's sleep. And if it's 6 a.m, there's nothing I can do about it, right? I just tell my team at stand up, hey, I didn't get great sleep last night. So maybe I pick the tasks that are, I don't want to say easy but more simple.
Yeah.
Pick simple tasks like updating our documentation or getting our test suite, shaving a couple of minutes off our test suite. Like those are impactful things. There's still huge benefits for the team. It's just not normally what I do, but I don't have the mental capacity to tackle the project I'm on right now. That's fine.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important if you're on a team to want to find out about your teammates and how they work, because then you can figure out how to synergize with them better so that you're more productive on the team as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I had a drill sergeant way back. Oh God, sometimes I forget how long ago this was, but and he said like one of the best things you can do is make sure your teammates know they can count on you.
Mm-hmm.
Like the moment that you make sure your team knows that they can count on you, like you hit this next level of being able to work together. So you should be able to rely on your team and they should be able to rely on you.
Right.
And that can be a huge motivator. It's like, I want to be the person people can rely on.
Right. And it's also a motivating factor for other people, because when they see people like that taking kind of that leadership role, not necessarily in title, but in behavior, they start wanting to be better, right? Because they want to measure up to that, right? It's not like, hey, you need to do better. It's, I'm going to show you how I do my best work. Come with me.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
And one of the best things I found for kind of understanding myself, the best things I ever did for understanding how I think and how I approach problems that helped me be better at that, was to take the strengths finder, the Gallup-Clifton strengths finder test. What it does is it kind of informs you. It's like one of those personality tests, right? But it kind of informs you about your top ways of thinking about things. And there's like 20 to 25 categories of thinking. And what I just took the top 5 one. And it's only like, I think $20 or something to do that and to read about it. But you get to look through, there's a book and you can look through all the different ways of thinking. And it tells you, one of the things it tells you is, here's why we think you think like this. And it gives you examples. And it was scary how accurate they were. But here's what the kind of things you think about and how you approach problems. And if somebody else has this strength, here's how you can interact with them to synergize better. Right.
Right.
And so, especially for teams, if a whole team takes this stuff and starts talking about what their strengths are, then you start understanding, okay, well, he has a good fit in this position and she has a good fit in this position. And this is how we can communicate better with each other, because now we understand. And now we're all more productive.
Right. Yeah.
So if you haven't done that test, the Strengths Finder, Gallup Strengths Finder, I would highly recommend doing that just to find out about yourself. It's really, really good. Sudo says, and measure your performance. You can't improve what you don't measure. See where you're actually lacking. Are you struggling with starting, or is it the latter half of the problem? Yes. And sometimes those things aren't, you can't do like empirical tests to measure things. Some of it is about measuring how you think and how you react to problems too. Your personality measurements are important as well. But I mean, if you've got, you know, like we do sprints at work, and one of the things that we work on with people, with the team, is are we getting our velocities right? And are we planning on Mondays? We're saying, I'm going to do this much in the sprint. These are the tickets I'm assigning. Am I accomplishing that? Yes or no? How far am I off? What do I need to do to adjust so that when I tell people on Monday, I'm going to get this stuff done, I actually can get this stuff done so that, you know, the team leaders can actually plan what's going to happen.
Right. You got to be honest about your capacity. You have to know, when I say I'm going to be able to get something done, I'm not burning myself out to do it so that I'm useless the next week. You can't, there's a saying, and I'm going to screw it up, so I'm just going to summarize it. But like, if you are at peak performance all of the time, then you're just going to burn out. You cannot be doing your best work all of the time, because then it's not your best work. It's just your normal.
Right.
And so like, you can only do your best work for short capacities, right? A marathoner cannot sprint for the entire marathon. They have to find a pace they can sustain.
Yeah. And it's, because that'd be like running your car at, you know, 5,000 RPM for 7 days straight without a break.
Right.
Your engine's going to explode.
Yeah.
I don't care how good your oil is. It's, you know, it's just not going to work. But so it's important to understand, I think, how all these things, you know, to-do lists to unload your brain so that it can concentrate. Red Bull and coffee, right? Yeah, there's another thing. Well, I kind of left that behind in college, but, you know, all-nighter. Well, I still do the coffee. We went on keto, and my wife was like, oh, you can't put sugar in your coffee. You're going to have to stop coffee because the sugar in the creamer just isn't keto. And I'm like, well, screw keto then, because there ain't no way.
I mean, I drink my coffee black like a real psychopath, so I'm
well,
good. Don't need
no, I got to have my blonde coffee in the morning.
There you go.
But, you know, the to-do list to kind of unburden your brain, the understanding of how you think so you know what systems are going to work for you, the effort and the detail to understand your teammates and how they think so that you can know how to synergize better with them, and measuring things so that, okay, we're falling short here, so let's concentrate on making this better. You know, this is the area that needs work.
And I was just going to say, like, this isn't stuff you just figure out overnight, or like, you're not going to leave this recording or podcast and go to your team and say, okay, we're going to figure this out. Like, no one's leaving this Zoom call until we've figured it out. It's like, it's incremental improvements. And just like the way we build software, like, we iterate over it. You have to, you know, if you do take this strength test, or you do find out something about yourself by, you know, whether it be going to therapy or talking to someone, like, in a year, 6 months, even, like, reassess. You change, you grow, you learn. Like, you have to iterate on the ways that you work and iterate via reflection. Otherwise, you're going to lose some of it. You're going to not, the things that you found that work really well now are not going to work as well in the future. And then you need to iterate and reflect and say, okay, do they not work as well because I was tricking myself, and now I've like learned my own shit. I've sawn through the bullshit. Like, my brain knows now, and I just have to trick myself again. Or like, is it not working because I'm not doing something? You know, there's a reflection piece that comes with all of this, and it's very important.
Yeah, and I think an important part of that too is to be purposeful about that stuff.
Mhm.
You can't just, yeah, I'll be more productive. Sure, I'll be more. You have to be very purposeful and very specific about, I'm going to be more productive by doing this, and I'm going to produce this.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you have to spell it out, because you can't measure. Sure, I'll be more productive.
Yeah.
That's
Well, how do you check off the upgrade to Rails 7 to-do list item? Like,
right.
you don't check that item off. You say, okay, I want to update to Rails 7. Here's how I break that down and actually do it. And then you check off those little tasks. It's the same way as like, how do I continue to get stuff done? Okay, this is how. These are the ways that I approach that problem.
Right. And it's important, because there's all these programs and things you can find on the internet. This is how you get things done. And that's
a way to get things done.
That's the thing. You have to understand how you think to figure out, because I guarantee you not one of those things, just like programming methodologies, not one of those things is a silver bullet. You need to understand a lot about a lot of them, and then pick the things that work best for your personality, your work habits, your brain chemistry, all the things that make you you. And I think that's important, but do go out and learn about those different methodologies so that you can understand and get ideas about, this part A from this one and part B from this one will work well for me.
Right. Yeah. And experiment, like, just, I think I was in the same conversation I was having with Andrew. We talked about, we compared our brains to like software or even gems that you pull into your tools. Like, you can only get the best from that tool if you understand the way that tool works. If you just pull it in and you're just like, oh yeah, I've got this thing now, it's here. Like, you can't hack your brain unless you understand how your brain works. So in order to start making a change, you have to understand what's going on now, just like we do with our software. Like, you can't just open up a file and start typing and assume it's going to work. You have to understand how the things underneath work.
Yeah, for sure. So you and I are both working professionally in a more team environment. But Creston, what kind of things, because you have a company and you have a team, but your day-to-day work is more solo-ish,
solitary,
than ours. So
absolutely.
What kind of things do you do to motivate? I mean, you mentioned that you feel responsible to your customers, but even then, something's got to light a fire under your butt every morning.
I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, it's running your own business. It's kind of do or die. So that's kind of like the motivation. If you don't make the money, you're not going to have a paycheck coming in. So you got to serve customers, to keep the paychecks coming in. So that's been motivation enough for me. But a lot of it is but certain things can slip a day, slip 2 days. But the promises that I make to the customers, that's the motivation for me to do it. Like, I say, oh, we need it by here. I said, okay, by this date. I said, okay, well, I can have it done a little bit in advance of that. So I have plenty of deadlines coming in from, multiple clients, and then people who are, and this is not just consulting, but even my app, they're looking for a new feature because they have this new project that's going to be starting. So they would ideally like to have this new feature in place by then. So really, that's just the motivation that I need to get this stuff done. That's pretty much what it is. And yes, I could slip a day or two here or there, but I try to focus and just do it. And like, I was laughing a little bit when you were talking about different people learning different ways and looking at different methods for, getting things done. I think there's a book called Getting Things Done.
Yeah.
And I actually listened to the audiobook, and my brain was just like, it was just such a scientific way of, I was like, whatever. I'd never even finished it. It's rare I don't finish a book. I didn't even finish that thing. So getting things done, I didn't even read the book, Getting Things Done. But
oh, the irony.
Off to a great start.
but basically what I do is I focus exactly the same things you're saying. Focus on a few things. I have that accountability. I had to break things down and say, all right, I need to get, this number one thing done. Here's my things 1, 2, and 3. And sometimes I'm just working on that number one all day just because that's what it needs. I just start some music and I just go. Now, one thing we haven't talked about that is, I find also highly important is minimizing distractions. So that's a huge thing for me. Now, you may think, yes, I'm solitary, I should have very few distractions, but I know there's two types of distractions. One, your own, you seeking something, you becoming distracted, like, oh, looking at social media, oh, looking at this, or somebody, but an email coming, but there's also external distractions, like an email coming in my case, like, oh, I got this thing I got to deal with, or your boss comes in and wants to have a discussion, or another team member needs some help with something. So I think that's another huge area that whereas it is important to address those for your business or whatever you're working on, it also hits your productivity. So
Yeah.
like one thing, I'll just throw this out there. One thing I do is that I've specifically engineered my email so I don't have to look at it. I actually set up a separate email account that triggers sound notifications on my phone. So I program these specific clients that I'm working and want to know if something comes in to forward to that separate address, that I get an audio notification on my phone. So all the other emails can come in. I ignore it. I'm focused. I'm working on my stuff. But if the thing goes, I'm like, okay, I check out to see what's going on. So that's one thing I do to kind of address distractions as much. But I know that's another area.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing that we haven't touched on yet, but that's a big deal, because in today's connected world, like, my bloody phone is pinging every 35 seconds, from all the different things that I've got. I
turned all that crap off except for that one email address.
Right. Well, the big problem is because I have to be on call at certain times, and so I have to get pings,
Sure.
And then I forget during the day to turn that crap off. And then I'm like, I don't want to go set all that shit in Slack. So it just pings, and I'll just turn my phone down. Well, now I can't hear if my parents call me with something. But even if I do all this work to do that, it's something you have to pay attention to, because we're so interconnected with everything now. When I started work, that wasn't a problem. Right? I started before the first smartphone was out. Flip phones didn't ping.
There were more human problems. Like when you're in an office, like, oh, it's cake time, or, oh, it's, water cooler, hey, and that turns into a 15-minute conversation, So it always existed. It's just different now.
Different.
Yeah. But that's that reflection piece of identifying those and starting to see, like, oh, if I leave all of my notifications on, like if I have Discord open all the time and that little dot pops up, I know my brain cannot see that dot and not open it up. So I keep Discord closed when I'm trying to focus. But if I didn't actually reflect and say, well, why is it such a distraction? Oh, it's because of that damn dot. I got to just keep the app closed. It's not enough to mute it for me.
Right.
You got to reflect on what actually causes a distraction for you, and then essentially plan appropriately, which is a whole nother topic, planning.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. We may have to get you back on for 3 or 4 shows of that. Like one of the tricks I use for decreasing distractions because I work at home. So, and, you know, I got 3 kids and we dog sit and there's just lots of shit going on. So I will put my headphone. I invested in good headphones that I can get a YouTube playlist, an 8-hour playlist of classical music, because there's no words to pay attention to. There's no, you know, it doesn't get my blood pumping like listening to metal or something, right? I don't want to sit there and headbang at the desk. I can just, it's like white noise or something that can just distract and cover up all the extra stuff and let your brain just kind of mellow out and focus on what you're doing.
Yeah, I take it to the nerdiest level or geekiest level I can find. When I'm doing that, I put on my headphones and I put on the Star Trek Next Generation Enterprise engine noise, and just sits in the background.
There you go.
This white noise, like, oh, this is nerdy. But it is amazing how much that helps. Just getting rid of every little noise, and it's just for that long. That is
I'm just working in the engine room.
Yeah.
Like Picard that one time. Hey, did you hear that? I think we've. I can just tell the engine noise. Did we just drop warp? But yeah, that, you know, it's important to understand how you work, because one of my daughters, I suggested that to her about the classical music, and she was like, I tried that, and it just, my brain could not focus with that stuff on. So, you know, her brain doesn't work like that. And she's genetically linked to me, so, you know, different people work differently. So,
yeah.
You know, you have to understand how your brain works, and it's a long process. Like, I've been trying to be productive professionally for almost 3 decades, and I'm still tweaking things.
Yeah, and it hasn't worked yet.
It hadn't worked yet.
Well, and here, this is something that I think people don't realize too. Like, you can go to therapy for that. Like, you can go and be like, I want to understand how my brain works better. You don't have to have official diagnosis of some mental anything to go to therapy. Like, a therapy is just an objective third party who is not intimately involved in your life every day, sitting there and just helping you work through things, and helping you by asking you questions and making you prod into the dark corners that you might avoid, and you learn a ton. It doesn't have to be like, I have depression, I need to go to therapy. Like, you can just be like, hey, I don't feel as productive at work, I'm gonna, you know, hit up a therapist, and only go once a month or twice a month. It doesn't have to be an every week occurrence either. Like, that stuff can help. Because it can help you identify the other areas that need the attention.
You don't have to be broken to want to understand yourself better, because we're all broken anyway.
I mean,
so
what is not broken?
Right.
That's why, like, I love to refer to myself as weird, because to me, weird there's no negative connotations in my brain. If something's weird, I like it more. Like, but I do understand, like, that's why earlier when I was like, you know, you're weird or something, like, I don't want anyone to hear me say weird and be like, oh, you think I'm weird, like, that's a bad thing. Like, you know, there's no, this whole concept of normal. It's like, what? 9 to 5 isn't even normal. Like, your body hates your 9 to 5 job. Get out of here. There's no normal. Normal is a social construct we made up. Let's get philosophical here.
I can tell you, if anybody saw the room I was sitting in right now, they'd feel way normal compared to me. So, you know, it's a thing. I mean, I got, oh God, you'd have to see it, but it's almost inexplainable. Inexplicable. Yeah. English. That's my first language. Anyway. So, but one of the things I'm oh God,
oh geez, I just read chat.
Ignore chat for a moment.
People like this.
Oh jeez.
No, we're not glad you're here, Juan loser.
God.
What a.
Oh man.
People like that suck. Anyway. One of the things that I'm as we're talking about this that I'm starting to hear is that being productive has less to do with understanding the processes and more to do with understanding yourself better.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to think that digging into understanding how you think will go much further towards making you productive than digging into all the methodologies for productivity.
Yeah, I think there's I think the overarching strategies are common, but the techniques or tactics vary on the person. Like, for example, we were talking about, focus on a few things, maybe one thing, three things, um, break things down, minimize distractions. All these things are general strategies, but then how do you do each of those things is very individualized.
Yeah. Yeah, because you are an individual.
Yep.
What a concept, right? That's
Yeah.
why I started the whole thing off with like, it depends. Like, what
Right.
works for me will not work for you, not because like I have ADHD and you don't, but we're just like, you hit the nail on the head earlier. Like, we're just different people. We might be able to share the knowledge and say like, hey, this thing worked for me, and I'm going to go try it because and if it doesn't work for me, that's fine, but maybe some part of it did, and I can tweak or expand that part, and I can take that and eventually create my own Frankenstein's monster of my rules for productivity from everyone else's that I've experienced. Like, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, this didn't work for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing is, if you understand how you think, you understand yourself well enough to know that you can take a productivity technique and say, all right, I need to strip this bit away and this bit away, but this bit is good, and then I can add this thing, and that's going to work great for my way of thinking.
Yeah.
Seb says, I feel like mastering productivity techniques is only for YouTube gurus who earn by talking about them. That's probably a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that is part of understanding the task at hand, right? If the way you make money is by getting people to watch your YouTube channel, then the mastering your productivity tips so that you can regurgitate them and get more clicks, then hey, you're doing a good job, I guess. That's your job.
Yep. That's I guess he's being productive if they're doing that.
I mean,
but yeah, it's true. I mean, there is something to be said about productivity methodologies. You need to create some kind of methodology for yourself to be more productive. Because your brain just isn't gonna, holding on to that stuff in your brain is gonna melt it, right? So you got to have some kind of methodology, but this person's methodology is not 100% gonna work for me,
right?
But it may have a lot of good ideas that I can adapt, right? And this person's methodology may have part B of what's going to work for me, right? But in order to kind of craft that, I have to understand how I think. And that's not how anybody else thinks. Right? So, man, we're at an hour already. Dang. Gummit. I know, right? These so fun talking about this kind of stuff. I just I love doing this show. It's so fun having people on here to talk with.
Oh yeah.
But I think what we're kind of discovering here is that the mental aspects of being productive are much more important than the methodology aspects of being productive. You need them both, but I think first learn how you think.
Mm-hmm. You got to understand the problem to solve it.
Yep. Yeah. All right. So hope you guys enjoyed that. I really, really did. Drew, thank you very much for coming on and sharing that with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was
always love having you here, man. You're fun to talk to. So, thank you, chat, for being here. Hope you guys enjoyed that. We will be back next week with, oh gosh, I think is next week our panel. Yes. Oh, we have a good panel. Colin Gilbert, Adrian Marin, and Eric Berry are coming on to panel doing Vim versus VS Code versus RubyMine. What's the best IDE?
That's going to be a good one.
Yeah, so that should be all kinds of fun. Looking forward to the fist fights and the hair pulling. It's going to be great. So join us next Thursday at 3 p.m. for that one. I actually don't have anybody booked for the week after that, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but we'll figure something out. Maybe I'll convince Drew to come back on and talk about planning or something.
There you go.
But you guys can join us on our Discord server. I finally have one of those set up, so join us over there. The link's up there, and also let me throw the link in the chat here. I hope, assuming everything is, yeah, there it is. Links in the chat. If you want to come join us on Discord, we have a place for suggestions. We have a place for talking about streaming. I hang out in the live chat sometimes, so come hang out with us. You can also listen to the audio podcast version of this anywhere that podcasts live. You can come follow us on Twitter at Ducky Dev Show. I'm on there quite a bit, and you can PM me there if you have questions about stuff. You can join us rubberduckdevshow.com. Sign up to our newsletter that basically is our weekly announcement that our show has been officially posted. But maybe we'll get into more stuff there. But it has all our shows and stuff on it. And you can watch us live every Tuesday at 3 and Thursday at 3 Eastern time on YouTube or Twitch. Hey, buddy.
He was whining, so this is how I get him to stop whining. So just pick him up. He hates being picked up, so he stopped whining.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. So hope you guys enjoyed that. We will see you next time. And until then, happy programming.
Happy programming.
Happy programming.